Let's talk to the co-author of that report, Shanker Singham, who's in our Westminster studio. A very good afternoon to you. How would your proposals affect car exports, the City of London, financial services?
Well, financial services actually is one area where in the Chequers proposal we say in our report there are a couple of areas of the Chequers proposal where services are fine, and there's a good basis for a negotiation of an agreement between the UK and the EU. So on financial services, we're advocating a comprehensive, as we are with all other areas, a comprehensive advanced free trade agreement with maximum services liberalisation across all the modes of supply, and a regulatory recognition mechanism. So generally in our proposals, we're advancing the idea of a regulatory recognition mechanism, so you manage the differences as you go forward, and neither party can withdraw recognition in an unreasonable way. But we should take advantage of the fact that we are completely aligned on day one of Brexit, and therefore we want an advanced free trade agreement with maximum regulatory recognition and a management of difference mechanism, and that would be true of our financial services ideas as well.
But it might be that incremental divergence where the competitive advantage lay in the future, which is great if you're UK PLC. If you're sitting in Paris, Berlin or elsewhere within the EU, it might be rather less great.
Yeah. So what we suggested, and we include in the report, a regulatory coherence chapter. One of the central recommendations of our report is that we actually have to get a lot better at negotiating, of having a single independent trade policy of which the EU is a part. So we talk a lot about the fact that we have to advance our trade policy generally. That's where the Brexit prize is. That's where the opportunities of this process are. If you do all of those things, if you move unilaterally, bilaterally, plurilaterally and multilaterally at the same time, including concurrently with your EU negotiation, you're more likely to get a better result from the EU.
We've started too late, haven't we? But by agreeing to the sequencing that put things like the divorce settlement and the rights of EU nationals working in the UK first, the trade deal has been left to the end. And we've seen what's happened.
Yeah, well, I certainly agree, and I certainly say in the report that we've made a number of mistakes in this process, most of which have been related to letting ourselves be on the EU's battlefield as opposed to the sort of wider, global field which we should be on, because Brexit is a major global event. I mean, this is a major G7 country that's embracing trade policy for the first time in 40 years. That's a big deal, and we shouldn't have agreed to the negotiating mandate of the EU. But we are where we are. And I actually think time is a very important question here, because time is an element, it's a dimension of the negotiation. Now, we haven't used it well. The EU has used it against us. But in trade negotiations that I've been involved with and worked on, and actually any negotiation, time expands massively the closer you get to the deadline. So actually, if we change course now and we adopt this approach, I think it's perfectly possible to come up with a future framework for a trade relationship that would be in the withdrawal agreement fairly quickly, because the EU themselves have proposed broadly that they'll be willing to give us a free trade agreement. So what we're saying here in our paper is we want an advanced free trade agreement with maximum regulatory recognition. There'll be a big debate about exactly what that is, but that's a debate that we have in the negotiations themselves. So we can certainly get, with this proposal, with this plan, we can certainly get to a withdrawal agreement covering off all the other issues that need to be covered off. And then we start the real negotiation.
Yeah.
But the most important thing we can do right now is to have a reset and to take control of the agenda by putting negotiating text on the table. It's very difficult for the EU to respond to speeches and white papers. They need text on the table now.
One way to seize the initiative, you could argue, is by bringing back into play the idea of a £39 billion divorce payment. That would slow the clock, wouldn't it?
Well, one of the things we recommend in our report is that clearly it is very possible for the £39 billion. Let's assume that we've agreed the amount and we want to keep that in the withdrawal agreement. It's very possible to say that this will be phased, this will be sequenced based on certain milestones going forward. The payments will flow until milestones are not accomplished. And that's another way of accelerating and using our leverage more effectively in the negotiations.
In relation to those negotiations, the idea that the EU would allow the UK to develop a genuine competitive advantage over it is unconscionable. Many people would say it's just not something they're going to permit anyway.
Well, I think, the issue that's raised here is negotiability. I think we've made a mistake in constantly trying to ask the EU whether our offers are in fact negotiable or not. What we should be doing is setting up this. What we're really doing here is we're playing a sort of multi-dimensional game of chess on various boards. What we've done in the past is we've made a move on the EU board that's caused us to sort of sacrifice our queen on some other board. What we actually have to do is to say, look, we're going to advance unilaterally, things that we can do unilaterally. We're going to advance with the deals with the US and with others. We're going to actually formally accede or try to accede to the CPTPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and we're going to move in the WTO in ways that show that we want to be a force in the WTO and we want to be a liberalising force there. We're going to do all of these things that are under our control right now. And because we're doing them now, it means that when we land our proposals with the EU, they're going to land on terrain that is much, much better for us. Whereas if we don't do any of those things and we simply propose to the EU, then yes, we'll get the normal reaction the EU would give, which is, no, we're going to, unless you're identical to us, we know we won't recognise you. They've changed that view with other countries who have negotiated with them. But those other countries have used their negotiating leverage to maximal advantage, and we need to start to do the same.
Shanker Singham at the IEA. Thanks very much.
Thank you.